Headline: India has emerged as one of the country's biggest creditors despite historic suspicion.
Shipment of 870,000 AstraZeneca's vaccine doses from India today.
India gifted 100,000 doses of its indigenous Covaxin vaccine to Paraguay.
And now it's India that is sending humanitarian aid to the people of Palestine.
He set up a field hospital in quick hit Turkey.
India gave out $33 billion in foreign aid as per the last financial year 22-23. It seems fine, only until you realize that 16% of India's population is undernourished and 10.4% still live in poverty. Is India's generosity a burden? If no, then how is it helping us? And if yes, why are we still continuing with it, and that too at an ever increasing pace? Let's understand the different types of foreign aid that India provides. Number one is development assistance, which is provided to fund a wide range of projects. For example, India has helped Afghanistan build multiple dams, with the most prominent one being the Salma Dam, better known as India Afghanistan Friendship Dam. Number two, humanitarian assistance, which is provided on grounds of humanity. For example, India has been helping civilians with basic life necessities such as shelters and relief packages in Israel Hamas and Ukraine Russia conflicts. Number 3, line of credit that is provided at a concessional rate of interest. For example, India extended a credit line to Ghana, helping them finance their Standard Gauge railway project. And number 4 being peacekeeping and disaster relief, which is provided as a human resource to re-establish peace. For example, India has been providing UN with top-notch security forces, which have been totaling more than 275,000 troops so far. But do these aids help India economically? Let us take the Sri Lankan case study to understand the economic benefits of foreign aid. India and Sri Lankan foreign aid has a decades-long history starting from the 1950s with food aid post-drought and other natural disasters. Then, civil war broke out in the 1980s in Sri Lanka, where India extended humanitarian assistance to both the government and the rebel groups, and put active mediation efforts to facilitate dialogue, reduce tension between the two sides, and eventually end the conflict by sending a peacekeeping contingent. But how does all help India economically? This is where the economic game of aids begins. India started working on the Mahavali Ganga Development Program that was initiated in the 1970s, which involved constructing dams, reservoirs, and irrigation systems across Sri Lanka. It later also helped in developing the Northern Railway Line Rehabilitation Project that re-established the transportation system in Sri Lanka's conflict-affected regions. Now, these projects are a clear sign of India's investment in Sri Lanka, which facilitated trust building and collaboration between the two countries. This strengthened the business ties between the two countries and led to multiple projects being established there. Everything seemed like it was going well until Sri Lanka was struck with an economic crisis in 2022. What should India do at this point? Should they provide aid or let the country crumble under debt? With lakhs of crores in place in Sri Lanka, the losses incurred when Sri Lanka fails would be humongous and unimaginable. The costs are minuscule compared to the losses incurred in case of a failure. So, Sri Lanka can't fail in India's economic interests. India, as a major investor in Sri Lanka for decades, provided aid to Sri Lanka, offering fuel supplies, financial and food assistance. The crisis was averted, saving India millions of dollars, and once the Sri Lankan economy recovered, India got economically active again with different business projects including Colombo Port Container Terminal, a 500 megawatt wind power plant in Mannar and Punerin, and LNG import terminal in Colombo. But did India continue providing aid on the non-economic fronts as well? Let's discuss this in the next section.
On the non-economic fronts, India continued providing aids post-Civil War. At the times of 2004 tsunami that devastated coastal Sri Lanka, India was the first responders to provide humanitarian assistance through the deployment of naval ships, helicopters, and medical teams, and later pledged $1 billion for the reconstruction of housing and restoration of livelihood post-disaster. And sticking with a similar response during the 2016 floods and 2018 droughts in Sri Lanka. So that was Sri Lankan case study. But why did we pick Sri Lanka specifically? It is because Sri Lanka shows a complete scenario of foreign aids. India provided aid to establish trust for years. Then, entered business collaboration and established projects, followed by aid provision to save the economy, and again established multiple projects with high potential to generate foreign income. That's the complete economic story of foreign aid. Now, from our point of view, the other countries to whom India provides aid are at some stage in this cycle, with most in the project stage with low foreign income generation. For example, taking the African nations into consideration, Ethiopia has Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam that began in 2011 and is expected to be completed in 2023. For Kenya, India funded a Standard Gauge Railway project that began in 2014 and was completed in 2018. Other than this, India has been supporting Tanzania and Uganda in their irrigation and energy development projects respectively, vying for the constant Indian support being provided to these nations. These justify the economic front of the aids. But what are the major diplomatic benefits of aids? Let's discuss in the next section. Leader of Global South. Since the last decade, India has been projecting itself as the leader of the Global South, but words are just words in the end. The country's actions in providing constant support to these nations is the way to look forward. The recent event of the inclusion of African Union in the G20 is the moonshot to get the title. Countering China's rising influence. Beijing has constantly been trying for the past few years to act as a new power front to America. Their amazing economic growth, coupled with constant efforts in acquiring and building assets in third world countries including Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and multiple African nations like Kenya and Uganda, have always been in the news. India, being an emerging democracy, needs to counter China's rising influence. India takes a completely opposite approach in these efforts. It creates human resources instead of pulverizing them. Instead of gaining control over the weaker nations, New Delhi is more focused on developing good relations, rewarding human effort, and providing new opportunities for these countries to grow. Aid, instead of just scoring political points for the country, is also helping in building the brand of the country on the global stage. But still, are geopolitical interests above the well-being of country's own citizens? In our opinion, it is the government's responsibility to balance these buckets. But what logic tells us is that the amount of humanitarian aid India provides is less than 1% of India's GDP, and the economic benefits of these aids are way bigger than this amount. On the other hand, India is projecting itself as the Vishwa Guru, guiding the world towards a better future. And what would be a better action than helping the nations that need us the most, thereby building a global image and cementing the title of the leader of Global South? Foreign aid is not just a diplomatic handshake, it is a transformative handshake, a way to build bridges of prosperity, stability, and mutual understanding. This was a foreign aid story for you guys. Drop your opinions in the comments below, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Let's meet you in the next video. Until then, keep cutting the noise.